Well, back to South Australia now for another political story that's been bubbling away for quite a while. The announcement of 19 state marine parks has angered many in the fishing community, but scientists say they're vital to protect endangered fish and conserve our biodiversity. As the government and the fishing industry negotiate over what restrictions will be enforced inside the parks, a group of researchers is trying to understand exactly what the fish do and where they go, so the new parks will be effective. Patrick Emmett has more.
It looks like a scene from an exotic northern reef, and it is. But we're off the northern coast of Kangaroo Island, not Queensland. And the divers here aren't relaxing taking in the scenery, they're hard at work hunting down something called the western blue groper.
Well, it's a pretty charismatic sort of a fish. Big fleshy lips and big eyes, a bit like a sort of a Labrador underwater. It's an inquisitive fish, quite friendly and docile, and always happy to come up and see you when you're down there diving.
And it's probably just as well they're friendly, because the gropers can grow up to 1.7 metres long and they live for 70 years. They're also pretty friendly amongst themselves. Males can have a harem of 2 to 3 females and can change sex.
They tend to have a social group. There'll be one dominant male with 2 or 3 females. And we think what happens is, if the big male is removed from the population, the next biggest female will then turn into a male.
Simon Bryce is a marine ecologist from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and he's part of a team looking for the groper and this fish, the harlequin. They've been diving for them on reefs off Kangaroo Island, and when they catch their prey, it's not the dinner table where they end up, but the operating table. The fish are given a bit of anaesthetic, sliced open, and a small radio transmitter is inserted into their body. They're then stitched up and released. A series of small receivers placed across the ocean floor then tracks their movements. The receivers are later collected and the data is downloaded onto laptops. 15 of the gropers were tracked with the devices day and night for 15 months.
This is the entire data set from the groper tracking study.
What they found is the gropers spend most of their days in a very small area around their reefs, and at night they retreat into a cave for a sleep.
Gropers have probably been hanging around the same area for decades and decades, and just having a pretty cruisy sort of lifestyle down there.
The team has just finished tracking the groper and is now following the harlequin.
In the first day after we tagged the fish, we were getting detections already. So that was a good sign that the fish should at least survive the first few days after the surgical procedure.
But while the fish the scientists are studying might lead relaxed lives, the research is for a much more controversial subject, the state's new marine parks.
As far as battlegrounds go, it's one of the more spectacular. The outer boundaries of 19 marine parks have been finalised and cover 44% of South Australian waters.
The announcement of 19 marine parks has upset many of the state's fishermen, who fear they'll lose access to valuable fishing grounds. While the outer limits of the parks have been decided, they're now negotiating with the government over where they can fish inside the parks.
The outer boundaries are a significant first step, but the plans will determine where the sanctuary zones go, and they are ultimately the real marine protected areas.
That process we've just been through, I guess, is the end of phase 1 from our perspective.
The information Simon Bryars and his team are finding is part of that process. They're helping decide where zones and sanctuaries will be set.
Well, it's about working out the home range size of the fish. What we want to do is ensure that the sanctuary zone size of a marine park will be big enough to encompass the entire home range of the fish. We don't want a situation where you've got a fish that's moving in and outside of a sanctuary zone boundary where it might be vulnerable to fishing on the outside of the boundary.
Simon Bryars says that's important because even though gropers have been protected since the 70s, if they're accidentally caught by fishermen and thrown back, they still often end up dying because of the trauma. The scientists say there are concerns about the numbers of both species of fish, so getting the research right is vital for their future.